Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this powerful two-part series, Jack Schonely and I sit down with Jim Moss, who's a retired member of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, to discuss the invaluable lessons learned throughout his remarkable career. Join us as Jim shares his journey from growing up in a single-parent household to becoming a deputy sheriff, emphasizing the importance of humility and leadership and the role of cognitive diversity in building effective teams. With his experience as a SWAT team member and tactical medic on Air Rescue 5, Jim offers unique perspective on high-risk missions and the critical nature of debriefing for performance improvement. This episode highlights Jim's reflections on the relationship between officers and inmates and the varied opportunities within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We'll delve into the vital role of training, the intricacies of aviation operations, and the essential skills required for crew chiefs in the field. Jim recounts a memorable and challenging experience responding to an active shooter incident and discusses the extensive training necessary to excel in roles within the Special Enforcement Bureau and the Emergency Services Detail. With accolades like Medal of Valor and the NBC Hero of the Week award, whether you're interested in law enforcement, aviation, or leadership development, this conversation is packed with valuable insights and advice for those aspiring to make a difference. Thank you to our sponsors, Robinson Helicopters, Shotover, and Metro Aviation.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
A lot of agencies are training to support this mission, but not many agencies have the reps that you guys do. We talked about reps earlier and how important that is to identify the things that are problematic. So for the agencies that are, they're training, they want to support their SWAT team. What advice do you have for those agencies in identifying ways of training? And you brought up something that's really interesting now. Tell your SWAT team you got 5 minutes to assemble and get ready. What advice do you have for agencies that are looking for that kind of advice?
Well, there was an interesting study done years ago on athletes. I've been coaching and training athletes for 25 years. It's a passion of mine. And I'm always trying to learn and be the best coach that I can be. And I saw a study one time that was based on game reps versus practice and training and whatnot. And what the study had showed was that more growth occurred with athletes from gaining more game reps than anything else, including more training time. So their experience level, their skill level, their decision-making level, and all that stuff went up in a vertical spike in actual games far more than in training. So you can't really replicate game experience, right? And SEB is fortunate enough to get a lot of game reps in. We get a lot of call outs. And then you debrief after, and there's no better reps than the real thing. When you don't have those reps, you really have to be creative and do things that simulate game speed as much as you can. In my opinion, you need to use simunitions. It still hurts, right? You get shot with a Sims round, it hurts. There's still a little bit of anxiety there, right? You need to have drills where you're saying, hey, we got an HRT, R5's inbound, you've got 2 minutes to be on the helipad, and you think it's real, right? You really got to try to mimic your training as best you can. And that the training aspect is a whole, gosh, we could talk for hours on the training side of it, but the skills training, the shooting, the movement, all that kind of stuff, that's got to be ingrained through thousands and thousands and thousands of reps. You just have to get that. If you want to be your best, you just have to become an expert in that stuff, right? And then when you make entry into the house, you're no longer thinking about, well, hey, I need to keep my sights up this way, or I need to, I need to worry about my grip or my breathing in case you have to. It's all decision making from there, all of it. As soon as you make You get on scene to an emergency, whether it be a rescue in the mountains or a dive rescue or a HRT rescue or whatever. You can't be thinking about mechanical things anymore. That's all got to be muscle memory, and it's all got to be just built in. So when you go into a situation, it's all decision making at that time. You can't be thinking about, well, I got to pick up my front sight. My grip has got to be this. I got to do, like, if you don't have that first, I'll give you a baseball analogy, right? If a coach is telling you, hey, you got your hitting and you're dropping your elbow and your balance, you're not keeping your hands inside and you're not doing this and you're not doing that. If you don't have those basics down by hitting off the tee, doing soft toss, doing specific drills to incorporate those mechanics, you're not going to be as successful as you possibly can, because when you go to bat, now you're facing somebody that's throwing 95 miles an hour. You can't think about that stuff. That's got to be ingrained.
Yeah.
It's all decision making at that point.
They say in stressful situations, you revert to your lowest level of training. And that I could see that being very true. For all the reps that you experienced as a crew chief and also as an operator, what would you say the most one or two common mistakes operators would make when they're boarding or departing from an aircraft?
When they're departing from the aircraft?
Yeah, when they're getting out of the aircraft, or when they're getting on, was there something you can look at and be like, a lot of guys made this mistake? What would you say that is?
I would say, well, I'll tell you what's really important. Transitions at the doorway are very, very important, right? Especially if you're dealing with like an unsupported rescue strap, and you've got like a cliffhanger, or it's a hasty rescue, and you've just got like a basic rescue strap around somebody that they could literally fall out of. When you're mid-column in the air as a rescue medic, you're basically along for the ride. Once you get to that door, that transition in and out of the door, the smoother you are there, the less likelihood you're going to drop somebody or even getting somebody injured in and out of the aircraft. So I feel like we practice that a lot. I don't know if enough emphasis is we put a lot of emphasis on that on my team. I don't know if that's the case with other rescue agencies and teams, but I know that transition in and out of the helicopter is very important. I think it's absolutely critical that you've got more than one set of eyes on your rescuer as they go out of the helicopter. Your crew chief has got to make sure they're hooked in correctly. And as soon as I get a guy to the door, I'm checking him. He's checking himself. I want the other guy behind me checking him. I want to get 3 good sets of eyes on him, so he's not, hooked to a non-load bearing piece of equipment. Something didn't happen with the gate. The carabiner's wrong. Or just not hooked up in general, or the rescue strap is, hooked up to him instead of the load bearing hook. There's little things that could go wrong. And when those little things go wrong, it could be catastrophic.
Right.
It's the little things and attention to detail that some people have been killed with. There's other things that everybody has got different priorities. For me, I want to control everything that I can control. And then whatever happens from there, we're at the mercy of God and, the elements and whatever else.
It's a little thing until it's a big thing.
So it's a big thing.
Right?
Yeah.
And once it becomes a big thing, sometimes it's too late. I know there's people that look at things and go, well, that's just a little thing that you're critiquing. And said, yeah, but if you let these little things go, they become a big thing eventually. The potential is there. I mean, you just went down a long list of just getting in and out and securing in a helicopter. Is that something that you did lots of static reps for, not just for yourself, but for your operators?
Absolutely. So that's important. And some of our new guys now, I call them new guys, but they're not new guys. It's interesting that one of our new guys in the Air 5 program will have been a deputy for 15, 20 years potentially, and they'll do 8 or 10 years on the SWAT side. These are all experienced guys that know what they're doing, right? But it's also my job to make sure you know what you're doing in the helicopter now, because that's something that you're uncomfortable with, and it's just a learning curve, right? So although you're not a new guy, I'm always a huge stickler on creating drills of making sure that you're always snapped in, right? So we've got lanyards that are hooked to load-bearing points in the helicopter, and then the other end's hooked into us, and we don't come off those unless we're going outside the helicopter. Then the big hook comes in, we get hooked in, and then your secondary gets taken off. And we're constantly checking each other. And as a crew chief, my guys, they know that, I set up drills. I call it the crew chief Olympics on our team. So I'll have a list of, 20 problems I'll go through with our team. And there's built-in problems to all of those. I'll talk to the pilots ahead of time, and we'll put the helicopter in a position that's not, that there's no flyaway, there's no emergency flyaway, and see if they catch that. And if not, we debrief it. Hey, if we lose an engine, how do you expect us to get out of here? You didn't look for a flyaway. I'll pre-hook one of our guys into a non-load bearing piece of gear with our other guys knowing about it without him not knowing about it, to make sure. And I'll say, "Are you ready to go?" "Yep, I'm ready to go." And before he goes out the helicopter, I might say, "Stop. Now look, point. This is not okay. You're in a non-load bearing piece of gear," right? So we've always we try to set up scenarios of common problems. I'm a big proponent of doing the lowest possible hoist that you can do safely. So one of the issues I'll have is, or one of the built-in problems is, we'll go in and I'll say, "Hey, let's set up for a 200-foot hoist on a flat mountaintop that you could get done at 30 feet, right?" And "Are you good? Are you good? Are you good?" If it's a new crew chief, and this is pre-planned with the pilots, the ghetto bird pirates. He has a like that. You see that?
Yeah.
See what I did there? See what I did there, John?
We didn't miss that.
We might go set up, for a 200-foot hoist. And if we're training a new crew chief, he's got to look out and go, "Wait a minute. We don't need to do a 200-foot hoist if we can get away with a 30-foot hoist," because there's swing and spin and mitigation and all that stuff. So training wise, with our guys, we go through a lot of that stuff, and we start at the very, very basics. Like when they come to us, it's hooking yourself in and hooking yourself out. And it's not only that, but our guys, I'll tell one of our mentors or myself, and I'll say, "Hey, we're flying up to Barley Flats. I want you to take your lanyard off at some point and see if our new guys catch that." Because it's not only us that are responsible for ourselves, but when that door comes open, everybody's got to do a quick yes, yes, yes. Everybody's snapped in. That's teamwork, right? And that's when you've got three sets of eyes on things. So it's just basic, it's the same things that Ricky Hernandez is and some of the legends at SCB passed on to us and put us through. And it's just not reinventing the wheel, but being creative and just passing those lessons on to the new guys. And then they'll pass them on to the guys under them at some time.
Love it. Jack, I know you guys at LAPD had a lot of reps and experience dealing with SWAT from an aviation standpoint. Can you talk about that? And also maybe you can identify some of the lessons learned or challenges you guys identified for the agencies that may not get that same level of experience that you did.
Sure. I mean, and Jim will agree with me 100% here that the issues that arise at the smaller departments with smaller units, and that they arise at the big departments too. We just have the same problems on a small department exist on a big department. The differences is reps and volume of crime, for instance. Somebody that has worked in the places that we've all worked experience a lot more bad guys and people running and people shooting and all that stuff. Because of the volume, we get experience that someone in a smaller department maybe doesn't get, but a few times in a year. You might see it 100 times. So that's a real benefit. There's no doubt that that's a real benefit for specialized units and in learning this stuff and listening to people like Jim on what he's talking about with, especially in the crew chief role. But our relationship with SWAT was a really good one. I mean, it wasn't always there either. There was some rocky times, but we got through those times where there was a mutual respect between the units, and we looked at it as, well, that's our customer, and we're going to do everything we can for them safely. We told them no regularly, and there was a time when that no would have created some heat. And Jim's shaking his head because I know he's been there. Yeah. But you tell them no, and they go, "Are you freaking kidding me?" But today, you tell them no, they go, "Roger that. What can we do? What's the alternative?" They know that it's in their best interest to let the expert, which in Rescue 5's case is the pilots and Jim, up until 2 weeks ago, and the SCB operators, I know that they trusted them. I know they did, just like our SWAT guys trusted us. But that's an earned trust. And it's, we didn't say no because we just didn't feel like doing it. We said no because of weather, weight and balance, topography, distance, whatever it was. It didn't matter what the reason was, but that trust is important. But that takes time, and it takes training, and it takes talking and debriefing, so that when those things come up, whether it be airborne platform shooting, or insertion, or fast rope, or whatever all the cool stuff is, that there's a time and a place for all that. But there's also a time and a place where you say, absolutely not. We are not doing that today on that rooftop. And here are the following 10 reasons why. And you explain it to them. You just don't say no. You just say, our theory was if SWAT came to us for like training, and this happened multiple times, and said, "Hey, this is what we want to do." Our answer years and years ago, they would say either, "Oh yeah, we could do that," or they'd say, "No." There was no looking into it. What we developed was saying, "That's a tentative yes. We'll get back to you." And then chief pilot, chief TFO, safety officer, support supervisor, all the key elements would get together and say, "Can we do it? Can we do that training safely?" And if the answer was yes, we'd call up SWAT and say, "When do you want to do it?" Or we would call them up and say, "Unable to do that. However, we do have an alternative. We can go do that training at this spot instead of where you wanted to do it. Would that work for you?" That's probably the most important thing that I try and relay to people when you're dealing with SWAT. You got to push yourselves, but you can't go beyond that safety limit. Even for training, if it's real life situation, you're not going to pass that line. I mean, there are real life situations where you have to say no when it comes to aviation, and that takes some education of your customer. And then if you educate them, they start to trust you, and then the rest takes care of itself. Jim, your thoughts on that? Because I know that you experienced, I'm positive you experienced things multiple times where maybe you didn't do what the original plan was by the operator side. Because of it, the aviation side, it didn't mesh.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Wow.
Well, that's a big one, huh, Jim?
Yeah. When I was brand new to ESD, some of the fights between the crew chiefs and the pilots were unbelievable. And there was, to be honest, a little bit of a divide between the front half and the back half. And, in our model, the crew chief decides what the mission is. He decides, hey, we're going here, we're going to do this, we're going to that. And then he also decides how we're going to do that. Now, the caveat to that is that doable safely for the pilots? And before, when I was new, there was back and forth. Hey, you're going to do this. No, and there's this back and forth. And our unit has done an amazing job. And I think our relationships with our pilots are so, so good and so strong nowadays that we'll say, hey guys, we want to do this and we want to do that. And I'm listening, first of all, to see if that's a yes or no. If the answer is no, we're not doing it. I don't want to do it, because if you're flying this thing and you're saying it's a bad idea, I'm certainly not going to be the one to tell you, no, you're going to do this. And we've pushed the envelopes. That's the risk mitigation, right? Like sometimes we've flown, our guys fly IFR missions. We fly in the mountains with limited visibility. I don't think I've had the shit scared out of me more than flying underneath clouds in canyons and mountains, praying that they're not going to close up behind us on missions. But, we had a rescue in Baldy years ago, that same thing. We're going underneath clouds and just barely creeping through these canyons. And it was a couple that was stranded overnight in the snow, and they were in critical condition. And it was like, okay, guys, these guys there's no other aircraft that could get up there to get these guys out. And it was like, well, they're going to die if we don't get up there. So we got to really kind of hang it out here more than we may normally, if this was just something that wasn't as critical. But the bottom line on that is still the pilots, it was an inchworm technique. They go up one canyon. Okay, we're good. Okay, let's see the next canyon. They go fly up, under, now, down, around, and they get into another one. Hey, we're still good. As soon as they got to a point where they said, hey guys, we're done. All right, let's turn this thing around and get back out of here. And a lot of times, because of their skill and our trust in them, if they said, hey guys, we're good. No matter how scary it is in the back, it's like, I feel, okay, these guys got this, or they would 100% turn it around.
Right.
And we were okay with it, and we've got to be okay with it. So that relationship with those guys, we got to stay in our lanes. Look, I may call what the mission is as a crew chief, or one of our crew chiefs does that. But if you're saying we can't do that because we're all going to die, then guess what? We're not doing it.
Yeah.
I got to stay in my lane. You got to stay in your lane. The SWAT guys got to stay in their lane. Everybody's got a job to do. And that trust has just got to be there, that everyone is an expert in their own genre, if you will, that whatever your side of the house is doing, we respect that, and we're going to stay out of your way.
We're going to dig into this in a minute, where we really break down your job, as a crew chief. We're going to go into that in a minute, but I got to ask you here, you're kind of the middleman there. You're an operator and an aircrew member. Accurate? Is that accurate?
Accurate. Very accurate.
So are you kind of the mediator, the buffer, and where, I don't want to, how do you word this? You're not taking sides, but you're kind of the middleman in this case, where you are kind of explaining to both sides what you need and what we can do and can't do. That can be a very tough position, I would guess, at times. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I would say when I was new there, and there was a lot of, for lack of a better word, challenges between the crew chiefs and the pilots. Like, you had these military pilots and these old gruff, some former Vietnam era crew chiefs and whatnot. And you'd have a little bit of this through all these debriefs and whatnot. When I got to SCB, my generation, if you will, we, over a beer in the weight room, whatever, goes, hey, this is stupid. Do you guys really want to push these pilots into doing something that's going to get us all killed.
Yeah.
And we worked a lot on our relationship with our pilots. Again, like to our earlier conversation with the debriefs, we talked about this a lot, and we really made sure that our pilots were part of our team. There was no, they used to call them the bus drivers, right? Like, hey, you guys are the bus drivers, just shut up and go where we tell you to go, and that's it. That is not the case on Air 5. Our Air 5 pilots are part of our team. They're in most cases, we can't even conduct the mission without them. They are that integral part of our team. And we've spent so much time working on that team relationship with those guys. Our teams are much, much better off because of it. The first thing that comes to mind is like our pickoffs, like on a moving vessel, right? That really wasn't done a lot. Air 5 is one of the few helicopters, along with Coast Guard, that's able to do that. And we sucked at it. We were horrible at it, and sat down and really worked on training on that stuff, and that relationship between the pilots and the crew. So the crew chief sometimes is a little bit of a buffer, but I never felt like that toward, my last 8 years or so on the helicopter. I never felt like there was a divide anymore. I felt like it was gone. And I felt like I'd ask Rich Thompson or somebody, hey, Rich, can we do this? Yes, we can absolutely do it. Or, hey, we'll continue to do this until we feel like we can't do it anymore. And if that pushes all the way through the mission, cool. And if not, and I'm like, bro, perfect. So our pilots want to complete the missions just as much as we do.
Sure.
They understand too the difference, right? Are we going to pick up a guy that's overheated a little bit on a trail? Or are we going to intervene in a critical situation where this person's probably not going to make it out of here unless we get to them? And I think our pilots do a really good job at knowing we're going to push maybe a little bit hard, push the envelope a little bit harder on the critical one, because this person may not make it out of here but they still know the line. And when they draw that line, our crew chiefs are like, nope, okay, I got you. Turn it around.
It's good culture. It's a good culture. We talked about culture earlier, and you just told us it wasn't always that way, and
right.
that's good. It shows that you guys have evolved. I can say that for our unit too. We evolved. The years of Jaffos and just sit there and shut up, kid. I'm the pilot. Those days are gone, as they should be.
Right.
But they were there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Something else I want to bring up and talk about briefly before we get into some more of the roles and responsibility of the crew chief on Air Rescue 5 and what Air Rescue 5 does. I want to talk about EPs as they relate to these situations. Just last week, I think it was last week, there was a Texas agency that was doing some SWAT training. They had an aircraft full of SWAT members that had a hard landing. I don't know anything more than that. The reason I bring it up is I think it's important for the pilots and air crews to think through how having a fully loaded aircraft is going to impact your EPs. If God forbid you have to auto rotate, what does that look like when you're fully loaded down? Or any of the EPs we go through, I think it's important to go one by one through those different procedures and consider what a fully weighted aircraft is going to be like executing those things. Jack, is that something you guys had the opportunity to do, or is that something that you looking in hindsight you would add to a training list?
Well, we didn't practice EPs with everybody in the back, but we talked about it at length and the difference that it's going to cause. Now, we're not talking about a Super Puma, twin engine Super Puma like Jim's in for his crew chief pop, but in the A-Star, for instance, you got a couple SWAT guys in the back, or they're shooters out on the benches or whatever. We would talk about that and how it's going to feel different. It's going to be different because of the weight. So, it wasn't so much going out and doing a touchdown auto with a couple real SWAT guys out on that bench. That's irresponsible.
Right.
In my book. I mean, that's insane. But talking about it and anticipating the differences is something that you had to do. And we did. Mm-hmm. And we did, because it is going to feel different. you got two shooters on your left side of that A-star, and now you have hydraulic issue or you have an engine out. It is going to be different. You know, the flare is going to feel different. The touchdown is going to be different because you've got 450, 500 extra pounds out there on the left side. So it was something that was discussed regularly.
Yeah.
And we talked to the SWAT guys too. Hey, if we tell you engine out, get inside. If you can get back inside and off that bench, you're going to appreciate that later that you do that. If you can. If you can't, hang on. But if you can get back inside, we want you inside. Same thing if we were doing the SIP, the SWAT insertion, where they're standing on the skids. Get inside. If you hear, engine out, or we tell you get inside, just trust us. You're going to be better off in the long run, even if it goes perfectly, to be inside.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% agree with you. Executing those EPs with SWAT personnel or personnel in general is not what you need to do, but the conversation is important, right?
Yeah.
Just to understand mentally what you're going to be dealing with when you are trying to execute a real life EP if something happens. So
yeah,
just want to bring that up before we move on. That was a great conversation, and thank you for giving us your insight, Jim, on that from an SCB standpoint and a crew chief standpoint, because that's something we haven't really had a chance to do very much. Getting into the aviation program at LA County, I know it's unique. You've got the Air 5 rescue program, and then you've got the patrol operations. Can you talk about the two briefly and what the different roles are?
Yeah, so we've got, I believe 20-ish A-stars. I had the notes written down here for you guys, but we got roughly 28 spots or something for patrol birds. We're running the A-stars. Our aviation unit has the patrol helicopters. We've got a couple of fixed wing assets as well, a King Air. And then we had 3 Super Pumas. We're down to 2, and hopefully we'll be back up to 3 here again shortly. But even our pilots in Air 5, they're not assigned to, some people don't realize this, they're not assigned to SCB, they're not assigned to ESD, they're assigned to Aero Bureau. So they drive in, their locker is not at SCB, their locker is at Long Beach Airport at Aero Bureau. And those guys have a lot of hours, they have a lot of experience, our Air 5 pilots, because you've got to go, I think they run somewhere around, Rich was telling me about a typical pilot's doing about 900 hours a year in an A-star. Jack, does that sound about right?
That would not be unusual to be upward of 600. 9 would be high, but that'd be dedicated patrol flights every day. It's possible.
So that's 600 to 9, whatever. That's they're getting a lot of hours in.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I think back to our Air 5 pilots. A lot of them have upwards of well over 10,000 hours flying time. Yeah. And then they've got to transition to the Super Puma, which is a whole different beast.
Yeah, that's a night and day difference flying.
And then they're full-time Super Puma. Once they switch over, is that correct? That the pilots for Rescue Air 5, that's their gig. They're not hopping back and forth for regularly. Maybe they do for something, but for regularly, that's their assignment then, and that's their bird.
Yeah, that's correct. They'll stay with the Air 5 program. That's their mission. That's their platform. And then if they want to, if there's a need on the patrol side, those guys will, hop back and fly the A-star for missions or overtime or whatever's needed for there. They can still do both. And they want to stay current on the A-stars, but once Air 5 is gosh, it's so complicated. I feel like, from not being a pilot, just with your IFR certifications or twin engine certifications, all the extra certifications you have to go through to fly that thing. And then, a lot of people don't realize this. Behind the pilot's, behind his 90-degree field of view, he can't see anything behind him.
Yeah.
So you have to rely on the guys in the back to tell you where your main rotor is, where your fuselage is, where your tail is. That there's a lot of skill there involved with these Air 5 pilots, and they're not, we put that thing in some really tight situations. There's trees, there's stingers, there's cliffs, there's stuff all around us. And I can't say enough about our Air 5 pilots. I think they're just amazing guys. They practice their trade really well. They're very, very skilled. And they work really well with the guys in the back. They have to rely on the guys in the back, and the guys in the back have to rely on them.
Yeah, that CRM is almost, super elevated at that point. You have to be dialed, from just a crew point or a crew chief standpoint and a pilot standpoint. Now, being a crew chief, can you talk about the career path to get to that crew chief spot? I'd imagine a lot of folks that are crew chiefs have worked in the field for a long time, like you kind of talked about. If you're a new deputy and you want to get to Air 5, what does that look like?
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
So you'd have to go the normal route. Everybody starts in the same location on the sheriff's department. So you're in the jail, right? Then you go to patrol. Then you do, X amount of years in patrol. And then typically a lot of guys will go to a specialized unit. I went to the gang enforcement team. I was on the gang enforcement team for almost 5 years, and then went to advanced officer training for a couple of years. And you kind of build up your resume and your skills, right? So you're able to operate in emergencies and all over the county and be able to teach and talk and do all that stuff. Ultimately, you have to test. If you want to work Air 5, you have to start on the SWAT side first. So you have to test, be accepted. There's a long testing process for that. You end up on a list. Hopefully someday you get, picked on that list, and you go through your training. You go through SWAT school. You go through long rifle school, gas school, you go through all these schools, and you get trained up by your team. And then you hopefully build up the ladder. You're the 7th man on the team, 8th man on the team. And the more experience you get, and the more you're trusted by your team, the more responsibility you're given. So you'll move up from 8th man to 7th man to 6th man to 5th man. And the line of the delineating line on our teams is kind of the 4th man. You have your scout and your backup scout who run the team, and then your supervisor, the team leader, is number third in the order, and then you've got 4th. So your 4th man on the team, he's the go-between between we call it the upper cone and the lower cone. So the scout necessarily doesn't always just go to the 7th man and say, hey, I need you to do this. He's just going to go to the 4th man and say, hey, I need this done. And the 4th man's going to go get the guys in the lower cone and say, hey, guys, we need to get this done, that done, this done, and that done. Or, hey, I need this equipment, that equipment, this, that, whatever. Some guys don't make it. They just don't. They honestly don't make it past that 5th man spot. You're the guys, the supervision there, people are trying to identify the leaders of the bureau, and those guys with the higher IQ that go out, they get the training, they get the experience, they put themselves through schools, they put themselves in uncomfortable spots, they train, they take a proactive approach in the bureau. Those guys are the future leaders. And then those are the guys that will say, hey man, let's put him in a fourth man spot. He's the one that's running the CP, getting gear, getting all this stuff dialed in. And then hopefully from that 4th man spot, you jump up to become a backup scout and then a scout.
Can I stop you there, Jim?
Yeah, of course.
Just for me and our listeners, when you said 4th is kind of the supervisor, is that in rank? Is it a sergeant, or is it an operator that just happens to be in charge of that team? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's actually our third member on the team in the stack, if you were to list them all the way down.
Okay.
Team leader is a sergeant, and he's a supervisor
Gotcha.
on the team.
But they're a full-fledged operator as well. They're not a stay at the command post sergeant. They are on the team, moving through that doorway, same as the other team members, correct?
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
If that person is a former SEB deputy and they've got a lot of experience being on the team, the transition is very, very easy. You just take a leadership role, like supervising plans and whatnot from your scout and your backup scout. If you're new and had not ever worked SEB before, well, then you're going to go to SWAT school.
Yeah.
You're going to work all the positions. You're going to work on the containment side. You're going to breach. You're going to do everything. So you know how to, operate every position on that team. You're not able to really supervise anybody if you don't know how to do that yourself. Right. So those guys build up their expertise all the way up till they're to the point where they're doing entries, and they're the third man in the stack, and What percentage of that position are former operators versus somebody who came into the SEB for that job and were not operators? Is there a percentage you could kind of nail there? I can't really give a percentage. It definitely fluctuates.
Yeah.
I would say that we've had guys, there's a couple of guys that come to mind that have gone all the way up the ranks as a deputy, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, a commander, and a chief. Jack Ewell. Guy's amazing. And we've got a couple other guys that have gone all the way up that chain to the commander level. Unbelievably impressive. Typically you would like to get those guys back as supervisors. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes they're moving on in their life.
Right.
Or they go to homicide, or they go to majors or narco majors, or they promote on to be lieutenants, whatever. So it's not optimal. You can't always get those guys, but it's typically, if they've been a proven entity at SEB as a deputy, you definitely want to get those guys back if you can.
Gotcha. Good.
So once you get to SEB as an operator and you want to be selected to be a crew chief with their 5, I would imagine it's in your best interest to be in a position 1 through 4. That's what you guys are looking for?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and to go to ESD now you're talking about leaving the SWAT side and going to the tactical rescue side. You've already got the SWAT work background in, so that's all good. But now you've got to go through paramedic school. You've got to go through dive school. You've got to go through mountain school. You've got to go through swiftwater rescue. You've got to go through winter SAR training. You've got to go through all these extra things. So the transition is basically, if you're on one of the 16 teams at SEB, you have to test again to get to ESD. If you're chosen and go to ESD, then you've got basically 2 years of training to go through before you can even be operational on Air 5, which a lot of people, don't really understand, because the job is so diverse and there's so many skill sets. You're a brand new, ESD guy, or you leave the red team or the gray team or wherever you leave. Now you're looking at EMT school, paramedic prep school, medic school, dive school, rope school, climbing school. There's all this extra stuff you've got to go through. And that just gets you on the helicopter, so your guys can say, you don't know what you're doing yet. Here's how you snap yourself in, right? Like,
hey, new guy that just went through 2 years of training.
2 years of training, our guys, including myself, you get through all that training and you're like, oh, thank God. Can I please just get on the helicopter and go on a caper and get involved in some shit? Like, please.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to go through. But it is honestly, it's the best job in the world. It's unbelievable.
And then you got to stay current on all the things you just listed, correct?
You have to stay current on all that stuff. So, John, I know you had a question earlier. I'm sorry, I'm taking the long road to get there, but if you do want to be a crew chief down the road, you've got to work the back of that helicopter you're back almost like on the SWAT team as the new guy, and you got to work your way up. And now you've got to have enough experience and trust within your team members. The crew chiefs on your team say that, hey, John's solid. He's been working in the back now for 5 years, 6 years, or whatever. He's really sharp. His communication skills would be great with pilots. He makes good decisions. Let's make him a crew chief. So then you'll go through crew chief training with the crew chiefs that are at SCB on all 3 shifts.
What was the person's title before that? I mean, they after they went through the 2 years of training, I'm missing something here. They're not a crew chief. They were an operator. They went through the 2 years. What are they doing now? What's their title? Are they with the crew chief? Are they still an operator? What's that? That's kind of like a middle ground. What's happening in that time?
Crew chief is not just the only thing that you do. So we basically have 3 rescue teams of tactical medics.
Okay.
And on those teams, typically we like to have 6 guys if we're lucky, right? And then the assignments are divvied up every day from typically the team leader or the crew chief for that day. You 3 guys are working on the helicopter. You guys are going to do dive training. You've got ground call outs. You guys are doing this. And that's kind of how it's sorted out. So like, just because you're a crew chief, that just means that, we have several crew chiefs on our shift. So I may be medic 1 today. I may crew chief tomorrow. So it's just a position, on the crew for that day of kind of, but we're all basically, I think, to answer your question, tactical medics.
Mm-hmm.
Or rescue medics would be a good, good name for that position.
So when Rescue 5, and I'm kind of maybe getting ahead here, they lift off from Long Beach, and they're going to stage. How many people are in the back? You got 2 pilots, and then you got a crew chief. How many more people are in the back before you go to Barley Flats or before you go to SCB?
5.
Okay.
Air Rescue 5. We got 3 in the back. One is a crew chief who's also a medic. He's just like everyone else. He's just crew chiefing for that day. And 2 pilots up at the front. So 3 in the back and 2 up front.
Gotcha. So that's a standard package.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Wow. And then by the time you're fully qualified to be a crew chief, it's time to retire.
Totally.
Wow. That's impressive. Thinking about all the different knowledge sets you have to be in that position is a bit overwhelming. So I can only imagine what it's like to actually do that. Thinking through your career and looking at your resume, you've earned a ton of awards, life-saving awards, Medal of Valor awards. There's a lot listed there. And I'll be honest, that's not something we're accustomed to seeing. I looked at your resume like, holy cow. But I can see based on your description of what you did in SWAT, the number of reps that existed there, and just the time you spent in the county or operating at a high level, how this could happen. When you think back on some of those awards, I hate calling them awards. It makes it seem like you won the lottery. It's something you earned as a result of the training and the things you do in your normal job.
The recognitions.
Yeah. When you think back through those, is there one of those that was more impactful than any other one that kind of stands out?
Well, I mean, first to kind of talk about the award thing, I think the awards that we're given is just basically means we were there. We were there for the operation and we did our job. That's basically it. And that's it. I mean, I don't think any of our guys, including myself, take those too seriously. In fact, none of us really talk about any of that stuff because that part of it doesn't matter. We just want to do our job and do our job really, really well. I've got a few things that stand out on rescues and calls that were pretty significant that I liked a lot. One was an active shooter in the Azusa area. And we were actually looking for some missing hikers in Azusa Canyon, Like we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And our pilots heard some chatter from one of the A-stars. Hey, we've got shots fired in Azusa. Sounds like an active shooter. There's several people down and the gunfight's still going on. And I said, let's go. I said, hey guys, get your shit on. We're going. We're going to be there. Pilots, what's our ETA? They said 4 minutes. I said, get dressed fast. Let's go. So we all got all of our gear on, did one loop around. And it was basically a suspect that had come out with a high power rifle with a scope on and just started shooting people, started shooting cars. A man walked past his house, shot the man, shot up several cars. I think in total there was like 5 people hit. Azusa PD got there and fought him all the way back into the house so he couldn't get mobile. They did a really nice job there. But we were on scene really, really fast. And we landed in a park about a block away and literally just ran down the street, the 3 of us. I told the pilots, keep it spinning because we got people down and we're probably going to be evacuating people out of here. We got up to the front of the location and there was a man down right in front of the Logue. And we gathered up all the flashbangs and stuff we had on us, gave them to one of the guys and said, we're going to go make a move on this guy. I want every flashbang that we have sent through the front door. Just start throwing these things. And my partner at the time, Casey Cheshire, and Ricky Hernandez, who was training me to be a crew chief that day, he was retiring the following week. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if we get him killed a week before he retires, his wife is going to come back and kill all of us, right? The man was just an absolute legend and would never miss anything. So we ultimately went up and we couldn't get any vehicles up to block us. We just did a rescue on this guy, brought him back, and then several other victims we immediately started work on this guy. He was in cardiac arrest. We had other victims that we got to that we just said, hey, went on the radio and said, hey, listen, anybody who has a victim that's injured, get him to the school. We'll deal with it there. Stop the bleeds and just put him in a car. I don't care how you get him there. Just get him to the school and we'll deal with him there. One of the victims was deceased already, unfortunately. We got an elderly woman that was shot in the head and another one that was shot in the chest. And we immediately went to work on them, loaded them both up, flew as fast as we could to the trauma center. They both lived, came back, got another load, flew them back. They lived. And just about everybody lived in that one, except unfortunately for the first guy. And then we had to deal with the suspect. And this is an interesting part of the job. So suspect was hit. We ultimately made a move and took him into custody. And we had to work on him now. Yeah. As the medics on the scene, now we had to go from working on, these poor people that this guy had murdered and just tried to murder. And now we had to try to save this dude. So that was, ethically, that was a little bit of a hard decision, but you just have to put that aside and you have to be professional and you have to do your job. So the suspect ultimately didn't make it, but we still had to, work on this guy and be professional. So that call to me just really encompassed a lot of things that you had an active shooter, you had rounds flying, you had Air 5 that just happened to be in the neighborhood. We're doing rescues. We ultimately, put the suspect down and now you got to work on the guy. So it just kind of, encompassed all the skills and the things that we did. And so, yeah, that was one thing that just jumps to mind.
Was that one of your Medal of Valors?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Yes, myself and my two partners were given an award.
And
for
how
that.
many Medal of Valors total?
I'm not sure.
No, from you, not just from that incident, but
I'm not sure. I think there was a couple.
On your resume, there's 4 Medals of Valor. There's a Life-Saving Award, a Meritorious Service Award, and the NBC Heroes of the Week Award. Well, what was that from an ocean rescue?
It's just being in the right spot at the right time and doing your job.
And I'm gonna insert myself here, Jim. You are a humble man, and that's one of the things that we're really loving about you.
Thanks,
Let
Jack.
me tell the listeners, all my time is in LA County. I'm telling you that I can't speak to any other department in the United States what they do with their Medals of Valor, but I'll tell you what, I know what LA County and LA City do. And they don't hand them out just because a couple of our guests have had multiples. Hans Alvarez from LAPD K9 just came on. He has a couple. You earned those, and that you're being extremely humble about them. But I just want our listeners to know that is a huge, huge deal on the LA County Sheriff's Department. If you win a Medal of Valor, they don't hand those out. That is a small club, and I just want to make sure our listeners know that, despite the fact that you're being extremely humble about it. I'll just leave it at that, and you can go back to telling us about what John just asked you about.
Yeah, NBC Hero of the Week. I want to hear about that. That's a unique one.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. That was a unique one, and it was a fun one too. There was a great outcome to that one. So there was a man, we had just lifted from Long Beach in the morning, and as we're just kind of peeling out of our airspace going to Barley Flats, we were monitoring. We always typically monitor channel 16, the VHF, the marine frequency, and we heard some chatter. We heard some chatter about somebody missing. Our crew chief, Kamal Ahmad, gets on there and says, "Hey, what's going on?" They said, "We've got a boat doing donuts basically in a row with no person on board." And it was about, 6 or 8 or 9 miles offshore. So it was pretty far out there. So we said, okay, we'll come over and see if we can help, lend a hand. So we went over, and there was a boat doing full speed burnouts all by itself with nobody on board. And so we assisted the Coast Guard with that, and they had already been searching for quite a while, and they gave us a search pattern, and we got an elevated platform so we can see a lot, and we're looking around, and we were searching for 20 or 30 minutes or so, and I'm thinking, oh man, this is tough. I think this guy may maybe below the surface or whatnot. And one of the pilots says, "Hey, some information came out that he was working on, I think it was like an oil rig or something, and he had a little dinghy, a little high-speed dinghy that he was on." And he goes, "Hey, why don't we head back towards where he came from? Just maybe he tried to make his way back or something or whatever." Like, yeah, sure. Let's try. So we started heading back that way. And sure as shit, about 5 minutes later, one of the pilots up front says, "Oh my God, there he is." And we were like, what? There's no way. Well, obviously, who's going to be swimming in the middle of the ocean without a boat? He was the only guy there, right? So we get overhead, and this guy had flip-flops on his hands. And as the story goes back, he was driving out at like 5 o'clock in the morning or something on this dinghy, and his hat flew off his head, and he went to go grab his hat, and the wheel turned, and he got ejected off this little boat and couldn't get back on. And the guy was treading water for like 4 hours. He put his flip-flops on his hands.
Wow.
And was treading water for like 4 or 5 hours, was exhausted, was hypothermic, was barely keeping himself up. And we just, by the grace of God, got there in time. So I was medic 1 that day, and I grabbed one of our rescue straps that had some flotation on it. We had a very quick conversation about how we're going to do this. And I said, just let me get close and I'll get to him. I just want to get this flotation. I just want to make sure this guy doesn't go down. That would really suck. You see him alive and then he slips under and then you're like, so, so I was able to, they got me close enough. I hover jumped in, I swam over to him and he was teeth chattering and says, thank God, it's so good to see you. And I put this strap around him and just snugged him up. And I'm like, dude, are you okay? He's like, I'm so cold and I'm tired. And so we ultimately, got the rescue on that guy and heard the story after that he'd been in the water for that long. And I'm like, dude, you are a freaking stud for, how many people are able to tread water for 4.5 hours and do that. So that was like a really fun one. And we were again in the right place at the right time. And one of our pilots spotted him, and it was just that was really cool. So anyway, they gave us like an NBC award, Hero of the Week on that. And I was able to bring my daughter, Grace, on with us. Kamal and I both were on that show, and I got to bring Grace with us. Those guys were super gracious and let us go on TV and bring her with us. So it was, I think she was maybe 12 years old or 13 years old at the time. So
what
that
an
was
impact.
That was really cool. That was fun.
Yeah. Wow.
That's great.
Yeah. The two things that you just brought up highlight the dynamic calls that we're a part of. You talk about before the shots being fired, you guys were up looking for a lost hiker in Azusa Canyon. And 3 minutes later, you're on the ground in Azusa, with your team looking for a bad guy. We talk about how we look for the bad guys and we look for the bad guys and find the good guys. And in the first situation, you were looking for a good guy, then found a bad guy. And the second situation, you found a good guy, and
yeah,
it's pretty neat
for sure
to put all that together when you look at, the impact you have because of the program you're a part of and the training and the dedication that you gave to the citizens of LA County and the region as a whole. It was pretty neat. So thank you for sharing that. And again, it just highlights how valuable these programs are. And, man, that's impressive. I guess, based on time, I feel like we could sit here for 6 hours and talk about all kinds of stuff, but we realize we've held you for a long time. So before we close out, Jack, any closing thoughts?
Jim, you're amazing. This was really, really neat. I mean, I knew a little bit. We haven't met before, Jim, but I knew Harold, who was with your Rescue 5, because I worked with both his brothers, and I knew about what Rescue 5 is. I've been around you guys. I've done coordinated training together, and when we did the downtown terrorist attack scenario, were you on that one with the fast rope onto the bridge? Well, I was in that A-star above you, just hovering above you there. That was a great one. So we've worked around each other and stuff, and I know what your job was, but you just really brought it together for me personally and for our listeners. I'm telling you, the crew chief position and that whole Rescue 5 program is very, very unique. I mean, if you haven't figured that out just from listening to Jim just talk about that one Azusa caper, it just shows you how unique it is and the specialties and the experience. And so I just want to, again, thank you for coming on. I learned a lot today. Yeah, and I thought I knew a lot about Rescue 5. I learned a lot more. You guys do great work. I knew that. We worked, there was many times that it was on incidents where some sort of critical incident, and then you just hear Rescue 5, and all of a sudden they're sitting there in a football field, just there. I mean, and they're there, and you knew it. And you said, wow, that's a great asset that we just got that we did not have. And you just add it to the list. So I really appreciate what you've done and personally and your unit. And thanks again for joining Hangar Z. This was a great conversation.
Yeah. Like Jack said, it's impressive to hear all the qualifications and proficiencies that you guys maintain. It's pretty amazing. Scuba diving and shooting, they're two of the best things ever, and then riding a hoist and operating a hoist and all the things that are in between that. Yeah. Really impressive hearing about your guys' operation. So thank you for the dedication you had to our profession, for all the lives you impacted, and again, for just protecting the citizens of LA County and the region. That's huge. Before we walk out, any closing thoughts, Jim, on your career or advice you'd offer to folks that may want to follow in your footsteps?
It's been a great conversation. We could probably talk for hours, right?
Yeah.
If you're a young person that wants to get involved in this, be resilient, work hard, go about it the right way, educate yourself, work hard, build yourself a great reputation, and reach for the stars. It's an unbelievable. I've been unbelievably blessed to have worked the units that I have. And it almost, in retrospect, seemed impossible to get there, but it is definitely doable for the young person. You just have to, you got to work hard. You got to be resilient, and you just got to keep pressing on until you reach your dream and reach your goals. It's definitely there for, opportunity for anybody. And it's unique, like we were talking about, LA County Sheriff's Department is a pretty unique department with a lot of opportunities. It's not just SWAT and SCB and helicopter stuff. It's everything: homicide, narco, DI in the academy, detective bureau. It's like LAPD, Jack, that it's a huge agency, and John, big agency. There's so many opportunities. Young people, if you want to work, just do your research. Look at these agencies and try to look ahead beyond patrol. What do I want to do after I push a radio car? And see if that agency offers that unit, and then go after your dreams. Go for it.
Good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about all the training you received, and I feel like in public safety, you've got like a PhD in public safety with all the training you did. So it's really neat to hear you go through that, and great advice.
Can you guys give me like a doctorate, or can I tell my wife?
Hangar Z doctorate, honorary doctorate degree, Dr. Jim.
My wife is a school psychologist. We lovingly call her the doctor. And I'm like, I can't wait to tell her now that I am a Hangar Z PhD. Can I get that from you guys?
Absolutely. We're going to have a certificate made up.
I'll hand drop for you.
Perfect.
With crayons.
Yeah, some stick figures and a little diploma.
Crayons and the dumb pull-off. Put that on there.
Well, doctor, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to call you the doctor from now on.
Congratulations on retirement, Jim.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Dr. Jim.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Guys, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Absolutely. We'll hopefully we'll catch you at an event with Jacob and his leadership team. And until then, we'll catch you later.
Okay, brother. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, see ya. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24-megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
As we wrap up this episode of the Hangar Z podcast, we want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our sponsors for making these conversations possible. I'd also like to thank Jim Moss for sharing his incredible journey and the invaluable lessons he learned during his career with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. From his experience in the SWAT team to his role as a tactical medic on Air Rescue 5, Jim has provided us with essential insight into the complexities of law enforcement and the critical nature of training and preparation. His commitment to supporting his fellow officers and fostering a culture of continuous improvement highlights the significant impact that dedicated professionals can make in their communities. Jim's reflections on leadership, humility, and the importance of listening serve as a powerful reminder of what it means to serve and protect. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this episode informative and inspiring, please subscribe to the Hangar Z podcast and leave us a review. Also, don't hesitate to share this episode with others who are passionate about aviation and law enforcement. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.